I'm here to help. Is there danger? Certainly. The light is my strength. Justice shall be done. I'm here to help. Certainly. The light is my strength. For honor. Justice shall be done. Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan.
Our allied town is being attacked!
For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Of course.
Betrayer of the light!
Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. For Lord Oran. Of course. Certainly. Of course.
Our allied town is being attacked!
A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. For honor. Certainly. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. I stand for the light. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. Justice shall be done.
Our allied hero has been slain!
For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. For Lord Oran. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. For my father the king. Of course. A sound plan. Foul name. For honor. For Lord Oran. Of course. For honor. For my father the king. Foul name. Of course.
Our
A
allied
sound
town is being attacked!
for honor. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan.
Our allied
Certainly.
town is being attacked!
For honor. A sound plan. Of course. Stand for the light. A sound plan. Certainly.
Our allied town is being attacked!
Sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Certainly. The light is my
Our
strength.
allied town is
A
being
sound
attacked!
plan. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. I'm here to help. For honor. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Of course. Certainly. For Lord
Our
Oran.
allied
Of
town
course.
is being attacked!
Sound plan. Justice is come. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan.
Our allied town is
Of
being
course.
attacked!
Certainly. A sound plan.
Feel my wrath.
For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Certainly.
Betrayer of the light.
For my
Our
father, the
allied
king.
town is being attacked.
Of course. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. Is there danger? For
Our
honor.
allied hero has been slain.
Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course.
Our
A sound
allied town is being attacked.
Of course. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Found. For honor. Of course.
Feel my wrath.
For honor. Of course. Certainly. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly.
Our
For
allied
honor.
town is being
Of
attacked.
course. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Of course.
Our
A sound
allied town
plan.
is being attacked.
Of course. The light is my strength. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly.
Our allied town is being
course.
attacked.
For Lord Orion. A sound plan. Of course.
Betrayer of the light.
Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly.
Our allied
course.
town is being
A
attacked.
sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. For honor.
Feel my wrath.
A sound plan. Of course.
Our
Certainly.
allied town is
Of
being
course.
attacked.
Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor.
Justice is wrong.
I stand for the light. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Justice shall be done. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. For my father, the king. Certainly.
Our allied town
For
is
honor.
being attacked.
A sound plan. Of course.
Justice is wrong.
For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan.
Our allied town
For
is being
honor.
attacked.
A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. Is there
Our
danger?
allied town is being
Certainly.
attacked.
I'm here to help. Of
Our
course.
allied hero has
Certainly.
been slain.
A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Of course.
Our
A
allied
sound
town
plan.
is being attacked.
For honor. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan.
Our allied
Certainly.
town is being attacked.
For honor. For Lord Orion.
You are past redemption.
A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. For honor. sound plan. For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan.
For my father, the king.
For Lord Oran. Of course. For honor. Certainly. For honor.
Betrayer of the light. You are past redemption.
A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Is there danger? Of course. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Sound plan. For honor. I stand for the light.
Our allied hero has been slain.
A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan.
Betrayer of the light.
Our allied hero has been slain.
You are past redemption.
A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. For honor.
Our allied hero
Justice
has
shall
been
be
slain.
A sound plan. For honor. For Lord Oran.
Our allied town is being
The light
attacked.
is my strength. Justice shall be done. Certainly.
Betrayer of the light.
For honor. Of course. Foul name.
Our allied town is being attacked.
A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor.
Our
A
allied
sound
town
plan.
is being attacked.
Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. I stand for the light.
Our allied town is
Of
being
course.
attacked.
Certainly. For Lord Oran. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Of course. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. For honor.
Our allied town is
Certainly.
being attacked.
Of course. A sound
Our
plan.
allied hero has been slain.
A sound plan.
Our allied hero has been
Certainly.
slain.
For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A
Our
sound
allied
plan.
town is being
For
attacked.
honor. Of course. The light. Certainly. For honor.
Our allied hero
A
has
sound
been
plan.
slain.
For honor. Certainly. Of course. Certainly.
Our allied
Of
hero
course.
has been slain.
Certainly. Of course. For honor. Of course. Certainly.
Justice is come. For my father, the king.
A sound plan.
Our
Certainly.
allied town is being
A
attacked.
sound plan. Certainly. I'm here to help. The light is my strength. Justice shall be done. I stand for the light. Is there danger? I stand for the light. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan.
Our allied town is being
Is
attacked.
there danger? For honor. Light is my strength. Of course. I stand for the light. Is there danger? A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. I stand for the light. I'm here to help. Certainly. For honor.
Our allied hero has been slain.
For honor. Of course. For honor. Certainly.
Our allied town is being attacked.
For honor. Of course. Is there danger? For honor. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan.
Our allied town is being
A sound
attacked.
plan. For honor. Certainly. Of course.
Our allied hero has been slain.
Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor.
Our allied
A
town
sound
is being
plan.
attacked.
For honor. Certainly. For Lord Oran. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor.
Our allied
A
town
sound
is being
plan.
attacked.
Of course. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Of course. Certainly.
Our allied
course.
town is being attacked.
I'm here to help. A sound plan.
Our allied town is being attacked.
Certainly. A sound plan. I stand for the light. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Certainly.
Our allied
The
town
light
is
is my
being
strength.
attacked.
Betrayer of the light.
A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly.
Our allied town is being attacked.
Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Is there danger?
Our allied town is being attacked.
Sound plan. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Of course.
You are past redemption.
Certainly.
Our allied
Of
town
course.
is being attacked.
For honor. Of course. For honor. Of
Our
course.
allied town is being attacked.
A sound plan.
Betrayer of the light.
Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Certainly.
Our allied town is
For
being
honor.
attacked.
Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course.
Our allied
my
town is being attacked.
For Lord Oran. A sound plan. I stand for the light. For honor. Of course. For honor.
Our allied town is being attacked.
Of course. Certainly. light is my strength. Of course.
Our allied town is being attacked!
Certainly. For my father, the king.
Justice is coming.
Of course.
Our allied town is being attacked!
For honor. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Certainly.
Our allied town is being attacked!
Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor.
Our allied town is being attacked!
For honor. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. For Lord Oran. I'm here to help. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Of course.
Our allied hero has been slain!
A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. I stand for the light. Is there danger?
Our allied hero has
Light is my strength. Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. Certainly. Justice shall be done. For honor. Of course. Certainly. I'm here to help. Of course. I stand for the light. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. The light is my strength. Is there danger? Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan.
Betrayer of the light. Justice has come. You are past redemption.
Of course. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. For honor.
Feel my wrath.
Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course.
Our allied town is being attacked!
A sound
Our
plan.
allies' hero has been slain!
Of course. For honor. Of course. Certainly. For honor. Of course.
Our allied
For
town is
honor.
being attacked!
Certainly. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Of course.
Our allies'
Certainly.
hero has been slain!
For honor. A sound plan.
Our
For
allies'
honor.
hero has been
A sound
slain!
plan.
Our allied town is being
course.
attacked!
A sound plan. Certainly. Of
Our
course.
allied hero
A
has
sound
been slain!
plan. course. A sound plan. Of
Our
course.
allied town is
For
being
honor.
attacked.
The light is my strength. Certainly. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly.
Our allied town is being attacked.
A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Of course. For honor. Of course.
Our hero has been slain. Our allied town is being attacked.
I stand for the light. The light is my strength. Certainly. A sound plan. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. Justice is come. Certainly. Of course. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly.
Take your time. Look around.
I'm here to help. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. Of course.
Our allied town
For
is
honor.
being attacked.
Of course. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly.
Our allied town is
sound
being
plan.
attacked.
Of course. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. Of course. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. Of course. For my father and king. For Lord Oran.
Betrayer of the light.
A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly.
Our allied town is being attacked.
Of course. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor. A sound plan. For honor. Certainly. A sound plan. For honor. Of course.
Our allied town
For
is
honor.
being attacked.
Feel my wrath.
Of course. Certainly. Of course. For honor.
Betrayer of the light.
Our allied town is being attacked!
Of course. A sound plan. Certainly.
Our allied town is being attacked!
A sound plan. Father. Certainly. Of course. Of course.
Betrayer of the light.
The light. Strength.
Our allied town is being attacked!
Certainly. For honor. Of course. A sound plan. Of course.
Our allied town is
For
being
honor.
attacked!
A sound plan. For honor. A sound plan. Certainly. For honor.
You are past redemption.
I stand.
Our allied town is being attacked! Our
Of
allied
course.
hero has been slain!
For honor. A sound plan. Of course. Certainly. For
Our
honor.
allied town is
A
being
sound
attacked!
plan. For honor. Certainly. Of course. Certainly. A sound plan. Of course. For honor. A sound plan.
Our allied town is being attacked! Our hero has been slain!